Hi, this is Dave Bellavo from LightWave Technologies, and welcome to this LightWave product feature tutorial, message logging. The message logging features presented in this tutorial are available in LightWave Client 1.2 and LightWave Server 1.1, now in beta and scheduled for release in Q3 of 2020. These features are described in our online documentation for both client and server in the Developer Guide section, Advanced Topics, Message Logging. Okay, so what is message logging? Well, it is a simple, fast, flexible way to gain access to LightWave client and LightWave server message traffic. So what does that mean and what's the use case? Well, if you currently use our products, you will no doubt be familiar with our diagnostic logging feature. Diagnostic logs can be really helpful when developing client and server API definitions. These logs contain lots of information about client and server messaging. There's product version and API information, request and response HTTP bodies, IPM data. If you've ever sent a question or problem report to our support team, we'll almost always ask you for an API definition and the diagnostic logs because we can use the information in the logs to quickly understand what's happening. Now, over the years, with LightWave and even with our earlier SOAP-AM products, from time to time, customers would ask, hey, we need some of the information in these logs, so how can we extract that information so that we can feed it to some other logging system, or archive the message, or forward that information to our performance monitor? Well, the answer has always been, well, you really don't want to do that. That's because the structure of the diagnostic logs and the information contained in the logs is difficult to parse. And more importantly, diagnostic logging is pretty slow. We view it as a development tool, not a high-performance logging facility. In fact, in our documentation, we warn that diagnostic logging will degrade performance, and it does. So we don't want you to use diagnostic logging for anything other than development. And perhaps very short term if something's going wrong in production and you really need to see what's happening with the message traffic. But that being said, having access to the message traffic and the ability to do whatever you want with that information is certainly a legitimate requirement. So in order to satisfy that requirement, we've developed the message logging feature. So how is message logging better or different than diagnostic logging? Well, first, instead of your application having to parse our log file or reach into our file system to access that log file, the LightWave process delivers the message logging events to a custom pathway server that you create using our fixed IPM format that we describe in DDL. We call these custom servers collectors, and the information about a particular message is delivered to the collector in a structured format that's compatible with all nonstop languages, and then your collector does whatever it wants with that information. Because you may not want every request logged, or you might want to send certain requests to one collector and other requests to another collector, we provide a flexible rule-based filtering mechanism so that you can zero in on the message you're interested in and have those messages delivered where you want. The message logging configuration file format is YAML, which has become a very popular standard for specifying structured data in configuration files, and it makes the configuration easy to edit and very, very easy to read. The message selection rules allow you to zero in on the request you want to forward to your collectors. The rules allow you to select messages based on HTTP status, IPM reply code, request and reply header values, HTTP request methods and paths, API operation aliases, and finally, when the total request time exceeds a certain value. You can also logically AND and OR rules together to create complex filters. So let's take a quick look at some of these rules in action. Here's an example of a filter that catches errors on a certain API operation. It will select a message if the HTTP status is in the range 400 to 500, or the reply IPM code is 1 or 2, and the HTTP method is GET, and the path is a certain value. And if all of those conditions match, the message is forwarded to the GET error collector. The rules also support negation, and here's another version of the same filter using negation. Instead of matching the HTTP status in the range 4 to 500, we're matching when it's not 200. And instead of selecting an error reply code range of 1 to 2, we're matching when it's not 0. And when a rule matches, the message is forwarded to one or more collectors. The collector configuration specifies the path mon and server class name of the collector process and the message content that should be delivered to that collector. Here's an example of a collector configuration where the message is sent to server class collector and the message content sent is the request and reply HTTP information. Here's another example that sends all available information to the same collector, but it sends it with a request code of 10. So you don't have to create a custom collector for every different message type. You can just send the info to the same collector program with a different request code and let the collector process sort things out accordingly. And what do these collectors do with the message logging data? Well, whatever you want. You can write it to disk. You could send it to an event collector like Splunk or AWS Kinesis or Azure Events Hub. You could send it to a security or performance monitoring system. It's entirely up to you and the requirements of your application. Okay, well, that's a very brief overview of message logging, and there's a lot more to it, so we encourage you to take a look at the documentation. That can be found in both the LightWave client and LightWave server documentation under Developer Guide, Advanced Topics, Message Logging. It's pretty comprehensive. It's got a lot of examples of the configuration for rules and collectors. And we also encourage you to jump in and give it a try. We have a sample on GitHub that includes a basic message logging configuration with working sample collectors written in C and COBOL. And you can use those samples as a starting point for your custom collector. And there are step-by-step instructions on how to download and install the sample and integrate it with your existing LightWave client instances, or server instances. And if you have any questions or comments about this or any other product feature, head over to our support website and open a case, or just send an email to support@newwavetech.com. Thanks for watching, and keep an eye on our YouTube channel for new product tutorials and demos.